abuse of power where they will just shut it off and they'll just do what they do and they'll say, "Oops, my camera shut off." Well, no, it doesn't just shut off.
Oh, damn. And I know I read a book about that. It's about Malcolm Gladwell. Have you heard of that name before?
No.
So it was with Malcolm Gladwell, and he was discussing how these body cams and what would actually go into this whole situation. So they were doing more so of how these body cams were doing. What's the word for it? He was just analyzing the footage from these body cams and going in depth of why stuff was happening and like what was triggering it, right? A lot of it went into how granted body cams were just a small part of it though, but they did discuss it though. But they discussed about the whole history of police and how taking a task force essentially and throwing them in an inner city and into an area where poverty and crime are very high and putting these police officers in these situations and with a lot of authority and a lot of ability just to pull anybody over for any reason. They did this in the 60s, I think, in Kansas City, and they found out it actually worked and it decreased crime. But then what
if they
happened,
keep a camera on them?
No, this was in the 60s. This was just to go. This is not necessarily about body cams anymore. It's just about the type of police work they were doing. So they were doing intensive.
But how were they? Sorry, I missed the part where they were keeping. How were they keeping them accountable? Sorry, that's the one part I missed.
Oh, I think it was I think I just mentioned that just body cams do keep them accountable though.
Okay, but in the 60s, how were they keeping them accountable? Like, how were they
knowing
that they were?
They weren't. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
there
what happened was that? Oh no, they weren't. But what happened though was it had worked in this small area, right? The crime went down, and it kind of did help this area. So what they did is they extrapolated it across the whole USA. But what they forgot to mention though, that these individuals in the first situation were highly trained and highly skilled police officers. So they went through a lot of training processes, so they were very well educated about the whole situation. And then what happened apparently is when they extrapolated across this whole area, they kept the intensity, they kept the ability just to pull anybody over for no reason, but they forgot to only get highly trained individuals for those situations. So then it became everyday cops. And then that's apparently what caused the abuse of power.
So they're pretty much saying that there's a correlation between lack of training and abuse of power.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, essentially right? Essentially. And I think that is true.
Mm-hmm. So like what they're saying is, I think it definitely is true. When you put someone who's not familiar with a stressful situation in a stressful situation, I do think that police work is an admirable job, it's a job that kind of commands a lot of respect. But on the other hand, I do think that it's the word I'm looking for. It's its own worst nightmare sometimes, because especially in using the states as an example, for a lot of good ones, there's bad ones too, and it looks like there's a lot more bad ones right now than there is good ones, but we can only hope that they're trying to fix that.
Yeah, and I think that's just one thing that I do think with police officers where I do feel kind of bad for them, because a lot of the times it isn't necessarily the smartest individuals who do become cops, right? Because being a cop does attract, right? And that sucks. And it's great for you that you're going to school for this. Like I believe that's the smart thing to do. And my buddy who's ex-military and he is going into the EPS, he was talking about how he thinks that there should be more training and that essentially you should almost be required to have like very extensive training before you go into the EPS, like such as military service or schooling. And I'm like, I agree with that. But
if you're going to become a police officer, or like, I think there has to be at least more training. Like, let's say you didn't go to school or go into the military, didn't go into a specific program like police studies or police and investigative studies, or take some kind of degree for it, or like you say, go into the military where they kind of teach kind of the same core values and give you the same kind of stressor scenarios and stuff. I think that in that case, for those people, they kind of have to single them out a little bit. And I think they do have to pick up their training quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where they're missing is I think it's a lot of, it's not just right now it's a weird scenario, at least the way I see it, with some of these cops that have been shown abusing power in both the States and Canada, is that there's a variety of older cops with kind of an old school mindset.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new cops, guys who have been on the force for 1 or 2 years and, don't have a partner, don't have someone watching over their backs, or like you say, old school cops with this kind of old school mentality of policing that in today's little society of ours just doesn't fly anymore. And they're struggling to adapt, and they get put in a situation, and what they were taught back then and what they're, when they get stressful, what they use now is that old school mentality. And like I say, right now it just doesn't fly. Hey, are we rolling, by the way?
Yeah, I was gonna say we're rolling, but then every time I started to talk, I just forgot to like mention it.
Oh,
But
no
yeah,
worries.
we are rolling.
No, I was just like, hey,
We are rolling.
I had no idea if we were rolling or not.
I forgot. I hit it because we were like mid conversation. I was like, oh, I want to capture at least some of this before I like disturb the flow of it. Cause I was like, oh, this is actually a good conversation.
No, it's great. That's why I was wondering. I'm like, hey, we're having this really cool
Yeah, I
conversation, and we're
snuck it
gonna
in there. I was like,
record.
oh, let me hit this record button here really quickly though.
Yeah,
But
no, it's good.
I think as well too. It's like it's so misrepresented though, because this whole policing situation, um, and the
It's
whole
tough.
defund the police movement. Because at the end of the day, if you were to take 100 random people, you're bound to at least find at least one or two assholes out of those 100 people, correct?
Oh,
When you
more
have
in some
so
cases.
Yeah, and like when you have so many police officers out there, you're going to have your one and two bad cops that are terrible at their job, right?
And
And
that
like they're the
situation.
bottom
Sorry, go
tier.
ahead.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, sorry. Go
yeah.
continue on.
And then, but the thing is though, it's they extrapolate these like one or two individuals, right? Right.
And
And I
that
think that's a huge,
situation.
really big misrepresentation. Anyways, go.
I was just saying, sorry. I got a bad habit of that, not knowing when to
No,
shut
there's
up.
a slight delay. There's a slight delay.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
always like, oh, let me get something in there really quickly. I don't think he's waiting for me to say
And
everything.
that whole, ACAB and that whole defund the police thing, I wouldn't necessarily say it was kind of tough on a guy like me, right? Because I have family that is in the RCMP. They're a big part of the family that, the immediate family that we see a lot. And I'm in, look what program I'm in. I'm in an investigative program. I get taught by police officers. I get taught by criminal investigators, crime scene photographers. Look at the program I'm in. But it is in that whole situation was also something I cared very deeply about, and I was very passionate about. And it puts people in a tough scenario. It kind of tests that moral compass a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Because like on one hand you have a marginalized group of people who've been marginalized for thousands upon thousands of years, as far as I'm concerned, right? You have that group of people that have finally hit a complete breaking point, and you can't tell, like, especially from, we're both white people. There's no difference, nothing different you can say about that. We can't tell, at least in my opinion, we can't tell a group of people who have been marginalized and, treated differently based on something they can't help. We can't tell them how to react. And I think, although there's other, external forces coming in and stuff like that, I'm not going to get into, but there's, other parties to blame for some of it. But I think a lot of that early reaction, especially in cities like Minneapolis, that's just visceral. That's just what they felt. They finally had enough. They finally hit their breaking point. They tried the peaceful thing, and they thought they made progress in the 60s, and it didn't happen. And now I think this was just the final straw. And in a way, I think it's a good thing, personally.
Oh no, for sure. And I think it's weird too, because like I had that one girl on the podcast, right? The Trump supporter. And I still follow her on Instagram for pure entertainment values, because her ideas are just so completely just like not necessarily fabricated though, but just
There's
manipulated.
there's no real,
Yeah,
you
so
don't
it's
feel
like
like there's a sense of truth behind it in a way.
yeah. But and then so like she would post photos and it's like and justification like the Black Lives Matter protests, while I do believe were justified,
Yeah,
there was
me too.
crime and violence that happened from them and arose from it. Right? You can't necessarily deny that. There was violence that
No.
happened at Capitol Hill as well too. But then she's talking about how it's like, oh, see this picture, this was the people storming the Capitol Hill. Oh wait, this was the Black Lives Matter protest. And in my head, I'm like, fair point, but you're missing one thing. Their protest is based off facts and something real. Yours is based off some
Yes.
crazy rabbit hole theory that somehow, granted, USA corrupt as fuck, but the
Mhm.
entire place of USA being as corrupt as, say, like, this would be bigger corruption that happens in Russia right now. And it's like everybody knows Russia fucking is corrupted, right? But there's whatever. Putin can win
Yeah.
another term, right? But like, this doesn't happen in the USA. Like, this is the one thing in the
Mm.
USA that's actually not corrupt.
Yeah,
Policies
they
are
do.
corrupt, ideologies are corrupt, but like the actual voting process is
The
not
whole
corrupt.
the whole democracy thing is something that both sides see as super important.
Mhm.
The whole democratic process of voting is something they do take actually